Very nice. Very nice, both musicians. Everyone is welcome here. Good morning. This is a safe place to become. Uh, Today, we're going to have our Green Sanctuary team do a little work for us, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about nature in my opening words, rather. There are, generally speaking, four ways that people, since our evolution as a species, has chosen to imagine nature. The first way, and probably the most common, is the notion that nature is something of an accident that arose in a universe that is also an accident. In this view, humans are also accidents who are dependent on nature and who had better start managing it like one might tend a garden so we can continue to survive as a species. A second way of imagining, common among many religious people, is that nature is an intentional creation by an entirely other God. In this view, humanity has dominion over nature and can take from it what we want while we wait for an end time when in the fullness of time, the creator God is realized and nature and most of humanity is destroyed. A third way of imagining, one common in this congregation, is that people arise from nature and have a kinship with her. In this view, the pathway to mental, physical, and societal health is also realized by working to maintain one's relationship with her and working for environmental justice. In this view, human consciousness gives us the capacity to stand outside of nature. Reason, logic, and science will provide the answers we need to make the right ecological choices. A fourth way of imagining nature, also common in this congregation, is people do not just come from nature, but are of nature. Our true identity as individuals and as a species is nature conscious of itself. In this view, reason, logic, and science are also important tools for knowing. It is, however, our ofness that allows us to transcend the senses, and with them reason, logic, and science in a greater communion. In this greater communion that provides the vision, it is this greater communion, rather, that provides the vision, imagination, and creativity that enables humanity/nature to continue to become. For many who enjoy this way of imagining, nature has an eternal dimension. Long before there was an Earth, a Milky Way galaxy, or even this universe, there was nature. Whichever way you imagine nature, you are welcome here today. Today, our Green Sanctuary team has a great service packed with inspirational messages, images, and music. If you can stick around for the after service, if you can, rather, stick around for the after service circle talk. It is one of the ways that we support each other on our journeys of becoming. And now for the announcements, which are printed in the back of your bulletin. If you have any additions or corrections, please let me know. I would add one announcement. Jim Fuller and others are heading up the repair team for the parking lot, and they're going to need some pick and shovel workers. And if you're strong enough and inclined enough and would like to do get a little exercise on the end of a shovel or a pick, please contact Jim and he will give you information about when you can come and have a little community fun working on our driveway into our parking lot. Are there other announcements?
Jim, I have one.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry. Speaking of Green Sanctuary, if possible, between next Friday through Memorial Day, I will be in town, and we have a number of native items that need to be planted in the more natural area. If somebody would like to come and help me out, I would appreciate it. There are 5 natives that popped up behind the swing set in the kind of wild growth area that need to be removed and replanted so they can flourish. And also in the one raised bed, we have about 100 helianthus sunflowers that sprouted during the spring, and they need to be moved also. So I could use some extra shoveling. I'm out of town till Thursday night. After that, it could be the weekend or an evening. Just give me a call. Thank you.
That's Diane Gibbons. If you want another opportunity to do some shovel work. So thank you, Diane, for that announcement, and thank you for your willingness to help us keep and expand our wild areas. Other announcements?
I have one.
Yes,
I'm
Helen.
the Social Justice Book Club on Thursday at 7 o'clock. The book is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. It's a lovely book written in a kind of a poetry format. It's a very easy read. You could read it in a day or two, and love to have you join us.
Thank you, Helen. That sounds interesting. Other announcements? If not, let's have our opening hymn.
I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got peace, love, and joy like a river, I've got peace, love, and joy like a river, I've got peace, love, and joy like a river in my soul. I've got peace, love, and joy like a river, I've got peace, love, and joy like a river, I've got peace, love, and joy like a river in my soul. I've got peace, love, and joy like a river in my soul. I've got peace, love, and joy like a river in my soul.
Amen. Thank you, Buff musicians, for that very lovely and lively choice. And now Jim Fuller will light our chalice.
I light our chalice today, not calling out a metaphor for your inner light, but rather a metaphor for the light in the stars above, the light in the nuclear furnace, forging the elements of the universe, the light of the supernova, sending those elements to mix with materials of other stars and coalesce miraculously into new stars and new planets, and even into our planet with its blue skies, white clouds, mountain streams, forests filled with creatures large and small, our planet with bipedal hominids with the ability of love. I light the chalice for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
Thank you, Jim. Excellent. Very lovely words today. And now Nan Lundeen will read for us an original poem.
Thank you, Jim. The title is What Heaven is Like for Earth's Lost. On her shoulder, emerald dragonfly blinks, exuberant to find free flowing streams bubbling pure. On the third day, she drinks her fill and rests hidden in hills of green where elephants trumpet, free from plunder, calling their sisters to trees, to clear water. Stirred by creation's guttural thunder, theirs is a future of new, strong daughters. The great Matriarch's trunk swings, spraying krill swirled sea foam, delighting the humpback whale, charmed by what is naturally hers, or was, until arrogant humans took it all away. On the sixth day, whale pauses, then trembles with bliss. Her slap happy fluke remembers.
Thank you, Nan. That was a great poem. Very, very, very talented. One of our very talented poets. Thank you. And now our affirmation is going to appear on the screen. And when it does, we'll read it together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Let's now continue to Monarch and Milkweed, our story for all ages, by Helen Frost and Leonid Gore.
Monarch and Milkweed by Helen Frost and Leonid Gore. Dedicated with love to Lloyd and Penny, Cameron and Jordan, beautiful travelers, H.F., and to the Markman family, L.G. In a patch of dirt behind an old red barn, milkweed stretches into warm spring air. Its roots reach deep and wide, its stem points to the sky. Monarch spreads her wings and rides the wind, past white and yellow daisies, across a creek, heading north. Milkweed's new leaves push out, then purple flowers, soft and round and fragrant. Monarch finds a dandelion, drinks its nectar, and flies on. She stops again, rests and drinks and flies again. Milkweed stretches taller, 2 by 2 its leaves spread wide, sheltering long-legged spiders, black and orange beetles. Monarch lights on Milkweed, drums her feet on Milkweed's flower, and tastes home. Milkweed's flowers fall away, green pods push out. Inside these bumpy fists, new seeds are forming. Monarch finds a mate and stays with him all afternoon, all night into the morning. Eggs in her body grow heavy. She searches for milkweed. A breeze bends milkweed side to side. Monarch chooses its best leaf. Swaying in the breeze with milkweed, she curls her body underneath the leaf and glues one pale yellow egg to its soft underside. She flies from milkweed plant to milkweed plant, stopping on each to lay one shiny egg. Inside Monarch's egg, a caterpillar forms, and 4 days later pushes out, shorter than an eyelash, almost invisible against the leaf's pale green. It eats the shell that held it, then moves across the leaf. It eats the leaf, it grows. And when it grows too big to fit inside its skin, it crawls right out, new skin already formed beneath the old. Yellow, black, and white, the monarch caterpillar feeds on milkweed's bitter leaves and grows. 4 times the caterpillar sheds its skin, and then, one evening in late summer, it weaves a sturdy pad under a milkweed leaf, hangs upside down, and shapes its body like a J. Its feelers droop one last time. It sheds its skin. It twists and turns and pulls its body up, transforming into a chrysalis. It hangs beneath the leaf, a shining jewel, jade green speckled with gold. 12 days the monarch chrysalis shines in noontime shadows. 12 nights it waits under the moon and stars. It grows darker, gray, then black and orange, as new monarch wings shine through. Early one morning the chrysalis splits open. A new monarch steps out, moist wings pressed against her body. She clings to the clear case of the chrysalis as warm air dries her wings. She opens her wings, closes them, opens them wide. A light breeze lifts her, and she flies. Milkweed's leaves, now full of holes, turn yellow, then brown. Their edges curl, and they begin to fall. Monarch flies from purple zinnia to black-eyed Susan, drinking nectar, getting ready. As the days turn cool, she turns south toward warmer air to begin her longest journey. Milkweed's pods are full, its seeds are almost ready. In September sun, the pod's strong walls turn dry and brown. Monarch flies and rides the wind, stopping only long enough to drink sweet nectar from a field of purple asters. She follows the last flowers of summer as she flies on and on, almost 2,000 miles, all the way to Mexico. Milkweed's pods split open. Brown seeds lay close together on a soft white bed. October wind catches a silky tendril, opens it, and lifts the seed into the air, carrying it out and away, across a river, to an old white house. A kitten reaches up a paw and bats at the white fluff until it disappears. Rain comes, snow comes, rain comes again. Sun warms the earth warms the seed, and under the dirt it opens. Roots reach down, a tip of green presses out and up toward warmth and light. Milkweed's first spring leaf unfurls. Far to the south in Mexico, Monarch rides the wind toward it.
Thank you, Green Sanctuary team, for choosing that very lovely reading. One of the miracles of evolution, I think, is that the monarch butterfly is a 2-generation journey to fly from Canada to Mexico. Very, very interesting, surprising, intricate nature. And now, because it's our we're concluding our pledge drive month, we have several speakers who will address that issue, and Joanne will sum up our pledge drive for us when our speakers are finished. So Hunter Leggitt, could you begin and with your piece?
Sure. Greetings from Ohio, and Dee is with me here, and she has a few words she wants to say after me. You know, those of us in this church, most of us have come on a long spiritual migration. Finally, end up in this precious patch of milkweed, and we need a sanctuary. People like us need a sanctuary to nourish us and carry us forward. And this is it. BUUF is it for me. And, I just want to say first that our church welcomes persons of every political persuasion, as well as scientific thought, opinion, and so on. So don't take this wrong what I'm about to say. But do you remember the Sunday after Donald Trump was elected president? Well, we headed for church, and over 60 people showed up for church and stayed for 3 hours. And Gretchen did a kind of a group therapy with everybody, how we felt and how stunned we were, and so on and so forth. And it was at that moment that I really realized how important this church is to us. At that moment, it's a place of haven, a place to regather strength, a place of mutual comfort and inspiration. And our pledge went up figure how important the church was. Our pledge went up that year. So this year, here we are, united by Zoom, separated by Zoom. This is a year when we need to take a great financial step forward. But at that point, we need to take a big step forward. Our minds have analyzed our needs. We created a budget. And we have a goal. And every pledge is important. They all add up. And every pledge counts. So we know what it takes. We know what it's going to take. So take that knowledge in our minds, into our hearts, and let's be generous. Let's give from our hearts.
Thank you, Hunter.
Oh, thank you, Ricky. I just want to tell you, I'm trying about money from an Indian point of view. First of all, we don't like to talk about these money. We can't really. We can't these feedbacks. And you know, the reason is if you don't do it, nothing can happen. It's like putting a plug into an electrical circuit, a plug, and nothing comes out. You know that there's energy back there because the minute you plug it in, it's going to turn on the light. This is what we need. We need green energy to have things happen. Because if money and greenbacks and green energy is in there, we really need them. That makes sense. We need the green energy to make our beautiful congregation grow and flourish, to blossom, to be all there. All the time we ask. There we lay.
Thank you, Deej and Hunter, for that very heartfelt testimony and very nice metaphors, I might add, too. Thank you. And now you can take my car by another one of our talented poets, Janice Zerfas. Janice, you are muted.
Yeah, I think I fixed it. Well, once you give to BUUF, because I kept thinking about it, where would I be without BUUF? I would not be a happy person, basically. And I am a happy person because of BUUF, and it helped me through so many moments of depression, and that I can say I have learned how to cope with because BUUF taught me and encouraged me to believe in the web of life. So I kept thinking about my reason for giving and about how all of us come to an essential reason for why we give, not simply to develop our potential, but because, again, there's a very deep-seated reason for our altruism, which perhaps we only discover by, like Diane, replanting weeds or the soup kitchen or who knows what. So, ode to generosity, or baby, you can take my car. I hope I will always know the contradictions of generosity, the one who is asked to make gifts of all her possessions, or not asked at all, just given, then found missing. A bowl of hand-picked raspberries, and then a misplaced wedding dress. It was in the dress bag full as a cloud, and then the wind shrift knocked the fullness out. Well, she could sew, she made another dress. The priest still whiskey soured through the vows. Those ascetic parents were generous without limits. My ovenware set of dishes, I still find at a thrift store. Their generosity was a raspberry cane field tossed and knocked about by a tornado that could have lifted the dress. There was always a ball-peen hammer or a bent, blistered measuring cup a neighbor needed, who really came to talk about bad weather. When I moved out, I was given to also. My baby blue baby blue Rambler went to a family who had to get back to Texas. I didn't have the title anyway. I may have earned with my grateful giving the station wagon, with the plywood serving as floorboards for the passenger seats, but not so. Still, there was the city bus or hitchhiking to JC with the non-vets, who always loved giving me a scenic detour around Johnson's Park, where dogwoods swayed their petals into river mud. Giving will always be a sinecure for me. You'll understand later was said repeatedly, and it's true. Lose the self and you'll gain another, and it's true, like a storm dropping off drywall. And my parents' incanted Bible verses, remember moths and rust, they're shorthand for learning to give. Surely they gave as they once had nothing. Then I understood, when I became nothing, how essential to give.
Thank you, Janice. Very, very inspirational and words. Also very good advice too, I might add. And
Thank you.
now, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, by Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Hey, sweetie. You know, we talked about since you retired that we were going to make a list of all the things we spend money on so that we could cut back a little bit. So I got the list together and I got it all alphabetized.
Who are you?
I guess being married to an engineer rubbed off on me a little bit, huh? So let's look. Under A, adventures. Yeah, we're not getting rid of those. Apples, avocado. The doctor said your cholesterol is a little high. We better keep those. Okay, so there's nothing under A. Let's look under B. Ah, well, here we go. Beer.
That's not going to happen.
Broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Well, we got to keep those. Oh, wait. How about this? We'll dump BUUF.
We'll dump adventures and beer before we dump BUUF.
Seriously? We don't even live in Michigan. We only visit for a couple of months a year.
And every time we show up, we're welcomed with open arms and hearts.
Well, I mean, that's true, but we have plenty of friends everywhere we go on our travels.
And how many of those friends share our values and support us on our spiritual journeys?
Yeah, but you know, we visit UU congregations all over the country. We can get what we need from them.
Name one other congregation whose minister quotes Gandalf and wears Star Trek ties.
Well, you got a point there. BUUF does have its unique charms, but I still don't think we need to continue to give them our money.
Do you think the pizzas Buffer makes at the soup kitchen are free? Is the food bank banking thin air? What about the community garden? What about the Zoom meetings that we've been attending for an entire year? It takes money to make those things happen, to keep the building open and to pay the staff. All of that takes money.
Okay, that's true. But look how much BUUF has grown. I think when we started attending, they had like 15 members. Now there are like 50, or I don't know, maybe even 60. With all of those new members, all those families, we can all pay less. Let's cut back.
No. Now that we have the opportunity to do even more good, more resources for religious education, more funds for community action. It's an exciting time to be part of BUUF, and we're going to continue to support our congregation.
Well, okay. I guess it's back to the list.
Amen. Thank you. That's a very lovely performance by Glenn and Susie Smith. And now Joanne Critic, who has been the point main leader of our pledge drive, will do a little summing up for us.
Thank you, Jim. I have put together just a very, very short one-page, one slide presentation to share. And I just want to just give a couple of highlights for everybody. So first of all, we started out the pledge campaign with a tree analogy, our giving tree. And we said, BUUF is like a tree, the fruit we produce, all the wonderful things we do for each other and in the community. And we, as members, are the roots of the tree, the trunk, the branches, the leaves. We help give that tree energy so we can produce the things that we know are important for each other and for the community. So I want to just give everyone an update on where we are today with our pledge drive, in case you were wondering. I'll first point out, you can see on the left-hand side are the names of everyone who has given already. So thank you, thank you, thank you to the generous buffers who have given. You are the leaves and the roots of our tree, and you can see the names listed here. As a highlight, I just want to point out that we have already raised, which is good. We've raised $23,548 with 16 pledging units. We've had 9 step-up givers, which is very touching. Out of 16, 9 of those 16 have increased their pledge by 5% or more from last year. So thank you. And 8 of those 16 are fair share givers, meaning that they're giving 2% or more of their income. So we can start out with the wonderful news and then move on to what we still have to do. So I put together this little, very small, brief chart to show where we are. So last year we had approximately 41,000 in pledges. And this year we wanted to raise our base goal slightly because of course our expenses are growing with Zoom services. And when we go back, we want to have hybrid services starting July 11th. So we raised that by a little bit, $45,000. But our stretch goal to do to meet some of the goals that all the buffers or many buffers have expressed are important to them was $55,000. To date, you can see our pledges were a little over $23,000. So we have a ways to go to meet last year's goal and to meet this year's and ideally our stretch goal so we can do some of those ambitious projects we want to get started on. So my plea to all of you is to please consider thoughtfully what you can give this year and submit your pledge form as soon as possible. You don't feel like you have to go digging through your gift bag to find your pledge form. We have an online pledge form that you could just go to our website, click on that and submit your pledge to get it in right away. The board is meeting next week, Monday, so just a little over a week from today, and they're going to use our pledge totals at that time to create the budget for the coming year. And if we don't meet at least our baseline goal, they may need to cut some things in order to balance our budget. So if you can at all possible get it in the next few days, it is very, very much appreciated. I know we have a lot of people who are intending to pledge we haven't received their form yet. So let's go. I think we could still meet our pledge drive and hopefully have a lot of good things to look forward to in next year's budget. Thank you.
And thank you, Joanne, for that update. And now it's time for our offering. And when the words appear on the screen, we will read them together. This fellowship is the community of ourselves. Its resources are our resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. And thank you all for your generosity. And if you're planning on pledging, please get your pledge form in to Joanne. And now, our hymn, We'll Build the Land.
We'll build a land when we bind up the broken anointed and all those who mourn, and will give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by grace, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by grace, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be.
Absolutely wonderful, Candace, Bridget, and Harvey Johnson. Lovely, lovely song by our BUUF musicians. And now, readings for our theme of the day, beginning with Linda Lobick. Linda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. This Wednesday is Endangered Species Day. And so I'd like to talk about a few endangered species in Michigan and connections between plants and animals. The first endangered species, which is both endangered state and federally, is the Mitchell-Sater butterfly. I first learned about this butterfly from Hunter Leggitt. It's a little brown butterfly with a wingspan of only 1.5 inches. And it lives in places called fens. Those are specialized wetlands that usually have alkaline water, and that causes a plant to grow there called a sedge. A sedge looks like a grass, except you can tell them apart by the fact that they have triangular stems instead of round like a grass. And so that gives us the saying, sedges have edges. The sedges are where the butterfly lays its eggs and where the larvae live. And the adult butterfly has a small part in pollinating, mostly of plants in the mint family. But it seems that the only place where this butterfly now lives is in southern Michigan. The second group of animals and plants I'd like to talk about are flower moths, namely the phlox moth and the lead plant moth. Both of these plants are prairie plants. And the reason that the moths are endangered is because prairie as an ecosystem does not exist very much longer in Michigan, mostly due to early farming in the state. Flower moths live on flowers, and the larvae actually eat the flowers. So why do you want to save a moth whose larvae eat flowers and sometimes seeds? If there are enough plants for the moth, then there are enough to survive. The last connection I want to talk about between a plant and an animal is from the plant side. That is the eastern prairie fringed orchid. The orchid is endangered in Michigan and federally threatened, and usually grows in prairies. It's about 3 feet tall and has flowers that are white and lacy, and it only gives off fragrance in the evening. That's because the pollinators are moths, especially the Pandora sphinx moth, which is rather large for a sphinx moth. I'd like to tell a little story about this orchid. But the story isn't from Michigan, but from Illinois. When I worked for the Forest Preserve, it's over 30 years ago, a botanist told me that he felt the pollinator for the orchid was missing and asked me to help pollinate it. So I had to play pollinator by taking a sewing needle to move pollen from a flower on one plant to a flower on a different plant. I don't know if the pollination really worked, because I believe that that year the plants were eaten by deer. Pollinators are going missing everywhere. And that's important, not just for natives, but for agriculture. In China, in Hanyuan County in Sichuan province, ever since 2016, there has been a lack of pollinators for the pear trees in the county that was known as the pear capital of the world. The pollinators were wild bees who have been killed by pesticides. So ever since then, farmers have to climb up the trees and pollinate the flowers by hand. And because humans aren't as good at pollinating as bees are, the trees aren't producing as much fruit as they used to. And that, well, you know how many orchards we have in Michigan, and that affects us here. I heard Bill Shane, the fruit specialist from MSU Extension say that wild bees are actually more effective at pollinating apple flowers than honeybees because the pollen sticks to their furry bodies, and so they can carry more from flower to flower. So thinking of how planting natives can really help everyone, I'd like to paraphrase Field of Dreams and say, not if you build it, they will come, but if you plant it, they will come.
Thank you, Linda. Very lovely, very, very interesting story about bees. And now Julie Williams will share with us. Julie, I think you're muted.
Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, someone please bless these seeds I sow. Someone warm them from below till the rain comes tumbling down. I'm going to read from Second Nature, A Gardener's Education by Michael Pollan, one of my favorite writers. He writes creative nonfiction, mostly about nature and food. He's also written a book about experimenting with certain interesting substances. We cannot live in this world without changing nature irrevocably. Having done so, we're obliged to tend to the consequences of the changes we've wrought, which is to say, to weed. Weeding is what will save places like Yellowstone, but only if we recognize that weeding is not just something we do to the land, only if we recognize the need to cultivate our own nature too. For though we may be the earth's gardeners, we are also its weeds. And we won't get anywhere until we come to terms with this crucial ambiguity about our role, that we are at once the problem and the only possible solution to the problem. Essentially, I came to see that my weed-choked natural garden was irresponsible. My garden plants had thrown in their lot with me, and I had failed to protect them from the weeds. So I ripped out my flower garden and began anew. This time I cut a perfect rectangle in the grass and planted my flower seeds in scrupulous rows, 18 inches apart, and as straight as a plumb line could make them. As the seedlings came up, I cultivated assiduously between the rows, using the Dutch hoe that my grandfather had given me. I didn't worry much about epistemology. Whatever came up between the rows, I judged a weed and cut it down. The rows began as a convenience. They make cultivation an easy matter. But I've actually come to like the way they look. I guess by now I am more turned off by romantic conceits about nature than by a bit of artifice in the garden. Geometry is man's language, Le Corbusier once said, and I'm happy to have a garden that speaks in that tongue. I know better now than to think a less tended garden is any more natural. Weeds are our words too. As I see it, the day I decided to disturb the soil, I undertook an obligation to weed. For this soil is not virgin and hasn't been for centuries. It teems with hundreds of thousands of weed seeds for whom the thrust of my spade represents the knock of opportunity. Not nature, strictly speaking. These seeds are really the descendants of earlier gardeners. To let them grow to do nothing is tantamount to letting those gardeners plant my garden, to letting all those superstitious Rosicrucians and Puritans and Russian immigrants have their way here. To do nothing, in other words, would be no favor to me or my plants or to nature. So I weed.
Thank you, Julie, for that very thoughtful and interesting metaphor. Rather than have our meditation music, I see we are running a little short. So on time. So let's go right to our message today. Growing a Green Sanctuary, Protecting Species, Protecting Habitat at BUUF by Harvey Johnson. So Harvey, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning, friends. I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen. Let's see. That's not it. Please bear with me here. So many screens, so little time, huh? There we go. I am Harvey Johnson. I'm here to remind you that everything is connected and how we at BUUF are trying to protect species by preserving our BUUF habitat. This is part of our bigger goal of minimizing human-influenced climate change. We are the church of the open mind, the loving hearts, and the helping hands. We are also the church of the red, the redbud trees that dot our Lincoln lot. We are the church of the red-winged blackbirds that sing to the morning. We are the church of the milkweed plant. Critical to the long-distance monarch butterfly that is unique to our part of the earth. These are some of the species of our shared habitat. As we covenant to affirm and promote 7 principles. In other words, we promise to say yes and promote 7 principles. In this community, it is our goal to teach these ideas to ourselves, our children, and to each other. The 7th principle is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. To respect, you must know. That which you know and love, you will protect. To be a UUA green sanctuary is to study and act for sustainable living and environmental justice, and to incorporate those things into our worship services and our RE. And that's what we've been doing for years. We have fulfilled and continue to fulfill our submitted 2016 Green Sanctuary Plan. We only have to submit a report. Oh, so sorry. If you are like me, you would generally rather be outside than inside. I was lucky to have been raised in this small town with freedom to roam the ravines and woods and dunes and lakes and feel a part of this beautiful existence. Observing and studying the natural world, kind of like Carl Linné. He was the Swedish guy who invented the whole kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species naming system around 1730, about 400 years ago. Animal and plant names were very random before Carl. He even changed his own name along the way into Carolus Linnaeus. You may have heard of him in some version of that name. He named about 4,000 species of animals, including Homo sapien, meaning knowing human, and 8,000 species of plants. This was a monumental feat at the time. Well, how many species are there on Earth, do you think? Well, about 10 years ago, we thought there was about 8 million that we had discovered and named. And we knew that was only about 80% of what was out there. But currently, estimates are that there's about 1 trillion species on Earth, 1 million times 1 million, or 10 to the 12th power. But who can conceive of that? We are each a part of a very numerous and diverse planet. It is our duty to protect our home, our habitat. Here is our habitat at BUUF. This cooperative community that we are a part. We are the stewards of 5 acres. a 1/4-mile long section of Lincoln Township. You can see our building, our parking lot, our solar panel array that makes about 80% of our electric needs, and the prairie and the woods to the west. You can perhaps see the ditches running along each side of our long, skinny property. Here's our deed from '84. There are probably thousands of species just on the BUUF land: bacteria, fungi, invertebrates like worms, mammals, birds, insects, trees, and plants. It is estimated that 99% of all species have come and gone. Here are the top 10 reasons for species extinction. The number 1 reason is numerous asteroid strikes over the eons, causing both habitat loss and climate change. Number 2 is loss of habitat for other reasons, such as us Homo sapiens taking over habitats, paving over habitats, ruining habitats. Number 3 is climate change due to human atmospheric release of carbon from burning of fossil fuels like coal and gas. This graph shows the percentage of species critically endangered in red and endangered in orange or vulnerable in gold. Nearly 30% of amphibians are threatened. Amphibians have been affected by changes in the environment and are now susceptible to fungi. Knowing that they are rare, I am always thrilled to come across a toad or a frog or a salamander. The International Union for Conservation of Nature declared 15 species extinct in 2020, such as this froggy, whose habitat was eliminated. Little salamander from Guatemala, looks like the salamanders in my yard, under the right wood, if you know where to look. Here's a myna bird, and a tropical plant in Mexico that is no more. Populations of pollinators such as bees and butterflies have shrunk greatly in our lifetimes. Bee hotels, bee stops, and a honey highway are some of the components of a national pollinator strategy that the Dutch have are crediting with keeping their urban bee population steady in recent years after a period of worrying decline. At BUUF, we are planting and transplanting pollinator native plants, as you heard, such as native sunflowers called helianthus, for those who like the Latin. We're trying to help maintain a pollinator-friendly habitat. It is our goal to protect and propagate pollinator species like milkweed to maintain the monarch populations. We propose to learn how to propagate milkweed to provide habitat for monarchs, also by protecting all emerging milkweed. At our St. Joe yard, milkweed plants pop up in our garden and the edge of the lawn. We have not applied any chemicals since moving here in 2001. I taught my neighbor, Mrs. Prose, what a milkweed was in her garden and encouraged her to let it grow, and she did. Many of you know that monarchs travel to a single Mexican tree habitat in the winter, and it takes several generations to make that journey. Here's a 1-inch milkweed plant in my garden that I will guard with a tomato cage. Here's a 2-inch milkweed at the edge of the grass protected by rocks. And a 3-inch milkweed in the rock garden. Like anything, you have to train your eye to even see. Here's Mrs. Prose's garden next to my yard, where there was 1 or 2 milkweeds last year. Now there's like 25. I'm so excited I have to talk to her. We are the Church of the Milkweed Plant. Here is a little graphic of our plan for BUUF grounds. I had to move our little pictures over to the right. Maybe you'll have to drag our little Zoom boxes over to the right too to see it. Our goal is to protect the BUUF habitat. to yearly reduce the grass as we have been for years, cutting out about 100 square feet a year. Doesn't seem like much, but it hopefully will add up. And we've been replacing with native plants and trees, and we're trying to create a sustainable BUUF habitat and to create a beautiful BUUF grounds and expand the existing gardens. And we're even considering painting the BUUF building. Ideas are welcome. We're trying to provide accessible garden plots for BUUF members. We currently have 3 beds, 1 raised, as you'll see in a moment, and a memorial garden at the building east side and Jake's garden mound out front. And we're trying to provide an outdoor covered space for BUUF members and rentals. Perhaps in the future, we'll build that outdoor space. Again, ideas and help are welcome. We're trying to maintain and improve the existing trails and bonfire area. If you haven't seen it, come out sometime, even before we start having services in July. Come take a walk, come see what we're up to. Here's a little quick tour of BUUF shot yesterday. If you haven't been to BUUF, maybe some of us haven't even been there to the property at 4340 Lincoln. And here's actually a new serviceberry tree, a native tree that was planted last week in memory of B. Takeuchi. These smell sweet. And a dogwood tree. Maybe we should paint our building pink like this dogwood. And here's a red bud, one of many on the property. And the raised bed that Jim Fuller put together. Thanks, Jim. And Lisa and Linda have been planting in. And yes, we have been working on our beat up driveway. We've got a plan rolling here, believe it or not. So that's what I've got. Blessed be.
Thank you, Harvey. That was very, very inspirational and informative, and also I had quite visually attractive. So thank you, Harvey, head of our Green Sanctuary team. And now let's turn to our final hymn.
Our mother, we are her children, we belong to her. Enishinabe gibabaya ogi wabanda kagegekishe gamushkwa
good choice by our BUUF musicians. Thank you. And now Jim Fuller will unlight our chalice.
You sharing the screen? Okay. So this photograph was taken by the Voyager spacecraft in 1990 from a distance of 6 billion kilometers away. And it was made famous by Dr. Carl Sagan, who wrote an essay. I'm going to close with just a few words very briefly from that essay. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being that ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and our suffering, thousands of competent religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and every peasant, every couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every plant, every animal, every species ever lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. There's perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceit than this distant image of our tiny world. It underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we have.
Perfect, Jim. Thank you. And now our musical benediction. Go in peace, friends. And if you can, join us for our circle talk and breakout rooms